could probably hear me differently now. Yeah, all right. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I think maybe even a little much kind of in your face there. Let's make it a little better. Okay, so a quick note is that we're obviously meeting today, and then we're going to take a couple weeks off, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we'll take Christmas off, we'll take the week after that off, and then we'll come back. I need to, double check my calendar, but I think that's what I've got down. So we are almost halfway through the gospel, which is actually about where we need to be, having, we began in the fall, and usually there's some extra weeks in the spring, and the spring tends to be a little bit longer than the fall. So this is actually where we need to be, because we have 28 chapters of Matthew, and I intend to get through all of them before taking any kind of major summer break or something. All right, that's what we're doing. So we encountered Jesus and his disciples as he has sent them out. He is following them into their towns. Of course, what happens, Jesus is becoming more and more popular as this is only increasing his popularity. And that doesn't really look good. So I'm going to do something really quickly. Words of Jesus color. Let's do a little bit brighter. There. A little more visible. And so people are getting to know him better or know about him better. And so, of course, John gets wind of all this. Now, John knows Jesus. They're cousins or some form of cousins, second cousins, third cousins, something. They're related to each other. Obviously, their moms are the ones that are related to each other, but they're very different ages, right? Which is interesting. And, of course, that's not really a part of the conversation in Matthew. That's in Luke. It has nothing really to do with Matthew except for the fact that they know each other. In John, you actually see a handing off of some disciples from John to Jesus in the Gospel of John, which is interesting. So each gospel, obviously they know each other, they know of each other. It's not like Jesus showed up one day where John was baptizing and John said, "Oh, hi, who are you? Nice to meet you." Right? I mean, that's not what's happening here. Yeah.
Mary made the trip north to visit her cousin. Was it Elizabeth?
Yeah. Well,
that's when John fluttered in her stomach.
Yeah, fluttered. Right. Yeah. So she goes in. Remember, in the Gospel of Luke, they're actually already in Nazareth. They start off in Nazareth, and Luke says she goes down, and then and so they know each other. So this is also one of these things, and I'll probably talk about this in a few other places here as we're coming up to Christmas. When you think of, and this is not Matthew 12 exactly, but this is on theme for the season. When Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem from Nazareth, which you see in the Gospel of Luke, that's when they're going. It's not like they're going alone. It's not like they don't know anybody. Okay? Joseph his family's from Bethlehem. That's the whole point. They're going back to Joseph's family town, which is Bethlehem, because that's where Jesse lived. That's where Samuel goes and finds Jesse and anoints David king in Bethlehem. So, they're going for the census. They're probably not going for the census alone, because you see later on, that's all in the Gospel of Luke, right? It's not in Matthew. And in Matthew, they're already in Bethlehem. In the Gospel of Luke, later on, only a chapter or two later, you see they're caravanning down there for Passover. And they come back, and that's when Jesus gets left at the temple, right? It's like, temple alone, home alone kind of a thing. He gets left at the temple, all right? And they don't even know he's gone. They don't even know he's missing for like 3 days because they're with a bunch of a huge group of people, right? And so if they're traveling back, they probably make that trip. Who knows how? They're supposed to go every year. Who knows if they're going every year? They just might go every year, right? So it's not like they Joseph and Mary, it's not like Joseph gets called to this strange place called Bethlehem, and they make this journey there, and they're alone in this stable because there's no room for them in an inn. That's not what's happening, okay? They probably caravan down there. They're all going down for the census. They're going to be with their relatives in Bethlehem for this stupid Roman census they've got to be a part of now. Yeah, that's right, a kinsman caravan. And they're down there, and now, okay, it's time for Mary to have the baby. And there's no exceptional language when this is spoken about in Luke. Yeah. You know, it's not like there's a, all right, so Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child, and while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. There's nothing extraordinary about that. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Now, the inn it's not a word that means inn like a hotel. It actually just means like where everyone's sleeping. So like they're in a house in Bethlehem, and if it's anything like a normal house in Bethlehem at that time, there's like a main room on the first floor that the animals come in at night, and and there's feeding and all this, and then there's another room upstairs where everyone's sleeping. Now, the King James translated that as inn, but that's not what we think of as inn. So there's like probably more people there than normal because, well, they're there for the census. So there's no room for Jesus and Mary. Right? And so they take the newborn child and they just take the kid downstairs. Right? And it's not like it's Joseph and Mary there alone and they're, Joseph's trying to figure out how to deliver a baby or something. No, they're probably there with other women who are, relatives. I mean, we know that, in the same gospel, Mary went to go hang out with Elizabeth for 6 months before this even happened. Right? And so there's nothing extremely exceptional about this, but we almost talk about it like there is. And there isn't, except for the fact that they're not very wealthy, right? They don't have a huge house. The family doesn't have a huge house. And so they put the kid in a feeding trough, right? And, and then, of course, after time goes by, people kind of go back. They seem to stay there for a little while, which we see in the Gospel of Matthew. And so, eventually they put the child in a bed, right? Or, sleeping with the mother, which seems to be the practice there. So what we've done is we've created this kind of mythos around it that isn't anywhere in the text. Now, the sad part, it's already sad enough, but the even more sad part is that when we get to the Gospel of Matthew, that's when you see Herod killing all the boys 2 years and younger. Okay? All right. Who are they in relation to Jesus? We call that the murder of the holy innocents. I'm actually going to be preaching on this in a few weeks. We're going to include it in Matthew. Yeah, if they're in Bethlehem during the census, they're probably related to Jesus in some way. These are his kin. Either first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, something. And so who knows when Joseph gets word from the angel, you got to get out of here, and Joseph leaves, who knows who Joseph told? I would assume some, right? So you just got to kind of think it's not, and I think the way Luke presents it is Jesus is actually born in a very typical way, which is kind of the point. And then we take it and almost make it atypical. And it's like, that's not what he wants. If he wanted to be atypical, he would have been born in the palace, right? But he's saying, no, it's actually very typical. Right? So, anyway, all right. So that's enough of that. All right. Matthew 12. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." I'll stop here for a moment. The previous section, we have not really seen a whole lot of pushback from the Pharisees at this point. We've seen a little bit. Remember the healing and the whole bit about the forgiving of sins and who's got authority to do something like that? All right, we haven't seen a whole lot. Now, as he's word's getting out about him, people are starting to know about him, they're going to start challenging him more and more. All right? So, this is a common practice for ancient Israel. When you go through your field, harvest your grain, you're supposed to leave some for those who cannot afford food, so the poor people can come in and take heads of grain that's left, right? And that's what they're doing. They're acting like those who would be kind of in the lowest class within Israel. That's how they're acting. It's exactly what Ruth is doing. Exactly what Ruth is doing. But here's the problem. They're doing it on the Sabbath. And according to Mosaic law, you do it, but you don't do it on the Sabbath. So that's actually a problem. So, to be clear here, the disciples of Jesus are breaking the Mosaic law. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, this is illegal for them. And it actually is illegal according to the Mosaic law. Remember, the Sabbath, they're not allowed to, there's no manna that's provided. Remember Numbers, the guy gets caught picking up sticks on the Sabbath and they stone him to death, right? So presumably, they've got him. They are breaking the Mosaic law here. There's no question about that. So how does Jesus respond to this? Well, he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests." So this is a time in 2 Kings or 1 Samuel, and David's on the run from Saul and his army. And David's got his army with him too. And they're hungry, so they break into the tabernacle area and they start eating the bread of presence, which was consecrated just for the priests. And so, no one seems to have had a problem with this. It's better than what Saul does. Remember what Saul does when he goes in to talk to the priests? He kills them all. Okay, so which king do you want? One that's going to eat the bread of presence or one that's going to murder all the priests? So Jesus is saying, hey, David did it. David broke the law. Now, that's kind of a big statement, though, isn't it, for him to equate himself with David? But we already know that's a part of what Matthew's doing. He's the king, right? And so he does this. Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? Now that's something. Just think about that for a moment. That's something that Jesus is outlawing the lawyers. This is a legal argument. This is not a theological argument for them. Or, let's put it this way. There is no difference between a legal and theological argument. This is, for us, because we've got this whole separation of church and state and all this other stuff, we forget that for them, the Mosaic law is the law. Now, they also have to deal with the Roman law. But Roman law is no less religious. It's just pagan. So, this is a legal issue. They could go to jail for this. In fact, according to the law, they should go to jail for this. And Jesus, he makes a legal argument back. Well, hey, the priests, on the Sabbath, in the temple, they have to be above the law, don't they, in order to do what they do? Doesn't a priest have to work on the Sabbath in order to make it possible for everyone to not work on the Sabbath? Doesn't a priest have to do certain things that other people, they have to be around certain animals, or not certain animals, but dead animals, right? to offer sacrifices and do all this other stuff that other people can't do. Now, you might not realize, but this is actually, in some sense, this is kind of a punishment to the line of Levi. Remember, Levi, those are the priests. And remember, Levi lost his birthright for murdering a whole town with his brother Simeon in Genesis. Right? So that was actually, they didn't get any land. They had to be the priests. And so it's not this elevated thing. It's this lowering. And the Levites aren't even at play here at this point in the history of Israel, and a lot of Judea. A lot of people have a problem with that. But so the priests, so Jesus is saying David was above the law. He acted above the law. The priests acted above the law. Go ahead.
The priests were supposed to be servants to the law. That was the curse to the Levites, that they become servants to the law.
Well, they are, but they also, in order to do their job, they have to act in a way that no one else is allowed to act. So what kind of a statement is Jesus making here, then, by equating himself with the king, who can kind of do whatever he wants, and the priests, who kind of have to do what they need to do? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. There it is. Now I want you to think, what is a priest capable of doing before the eyes of God? What is their job? They give absolution, okay. What else do they do? Or do they even really give absolution? They make satisfaction, but do they ever say, you're forgiven? Yeah. Okay. They help pay the penalty for the law. They do sacrifices, okay. How many priests heal people? How many priests actually do give absolution, declare you're forgiven? That's not a part of the law. How many priests, give sight to the blind and good news to the poor? Okay?
That's why the New Englanders here were taking on his followers, because they had been
because the disciples of Jesus are doing those things.
Weren't they sanctuary cities, the land of the Levites? Isn't that where people would go to get sanctuary?
Yeah, there are sanctuary cities, but that's for like manslaughter.
Right.
That's if you kill someone by accident. You can run. The way the law is written, you can run to the sanctuary city, and if you get there before someone from their family can kill you, then you're safe until the death of the high priest. If you can't get there fast enough and they kill you, that's it. So it's like it's like fugitive or something. You're on the run.
So they did have to deal with a lot of things that nobody else wanted.
That's right. So, but the disciples, they're doing so much more than any priest has ever been capable of doing. This is the point that Jesus is making in the Sermon on the Mount. It's the point that he makes with his healings and his declaration that your sins are forgiven. This is the whole point of even when at the very beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, that something greater than the temple is here. Something greater than the Mosaic law is here. So this is a problem that we have sometimes. This is the way that we talk, and I think it's wrong when we say things like this. Jesus followed the Mosaic law perfectly so that you don't have to. That's actually that's not a true statement according to Matthew 12. They're breaking the Mosaic law. And when we say that, it's the implication is that if you followed the Mosaic law, then you'd be righteous before God, but you can't. And that's not how it works either. If you followed the Mosaic law perfectly to a T, you still would not be righteous before God. And that's the conversation he has with the rich young ruler. I've done all these things for my roof, and he says, fine, follow me. The only way to be righteous before God is to follow Jesus. You can be otherwise perfect. And you're still will never be perfect enough because God has to say, you're a part of my kingdom.
Comment? You got something going on.
Christ Well, he's saying something bigger than the law is here. The law, this is Paul's argument in Galatians. The law has its place. It was given to the people of Israel for a certain thing, a certain point in time, as a guardian. And now he says something greater than the law is here. And that's why he goes and he says, you've heard that said this, but I tell you this, with the implication that what I say is actually more important. And we try to do all kinds of gymnastics, and we'll say things like this. Well, there's 613 laws in the Mosaic Law Code, and that's counted by the rabbis around the year 200. That's the Mishnah, 200 A.D. All right, I studied this in college. That was my major, Judaic studies. All right, and we'll say, well, as a Christian, we just have to follow the moral law. God doesn't want us to follow the ritual law or the moral law. It's like, okay, well, what's the difference? According to them, there's no difference between a moral and ritual law. Not sacrificing the right way is an act of immorality. Okay? Mixing with the wrong, planting your crops, mixing them is an act of immorality to them. So for them, there is no distinction between what's moral and what's rich. It's all the same. So and this is when we have this legal structure where we put everything under the law and forget that Jesus is saying something greater than the law is here. So how do we act? Well, according to the kingdom of God. Can we learn something from the Mosaic law? Of course we can. It's written to be taught, to grow in righteousness, but we are not bound under the Mosaic law. When we want to know what to do, we go to Jesus. This is why certain moral arguments that people want to make about things, you can't go back to Leviticus and make that argument. You just can't. That's not how it works. You can go to Romans or 1 Corinthians or some other place where you're going to get a lot more to make your argument, but Leviticus, you can't really make that argument out of Leviticus.
He who is without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah,
So Jesus lived a sinless life.
he did.
But how do we know his sins are?
Yeah, so Paul writes that the law was added and then sin increased. So the Mosaic law does show sin. But here, is breaking the Mosaic law code a one-to-one with sinning? It clearly isn't, because Jesus didn't sin and he's breaking it. So the law reveals that we're sinful. Now, there's another way to talk about the law. So that's the Mosaic law. See, as Lutherans, we like to talk law, gospel. We have to be clear about what we mean by the law. So this is what we call the Mosaic law. That is, this is what God gave to Moses. There's also, Paul will talk about the law of the Spirit or the law of Christ. He doesn't talk that way a lot, one time. But that's enough. The early church fathers talk about the law of Christ. So, I can talk about the Mosaic law, or I can talk about when Jesus says, if you've hated your brother in your heart, or you've hated your brother, you've murdered him in your heart. All right, let's say if you hate someone, have you broken the law? Have you broken the Mosaic law? You haven't broken the Mosaic law. Have you broken the law of God? Yes, you have. Okay? And so there needs to be a distinction there. So did Jesus ever break the law of God? No. Does Jesus break the law, the form of the law that God gave to Moses? Here he does, yeah. And you can even see in the Sermon on the Mount, he even says, again, you've heard it said this, but I'm telling you, it's a lot worse than you think. You've heard it this, but I'm telling you to do this, right? Or when he talks about divorce, and he says that, remember, you had this whole idea of divorce isn't biblical, but he says that God gave it to you in the law because your hearts were hardened. So even there you see, right, there's a great little example of He's giving them a law for a certain purpose, a certain function. All right? And I think it's really important, especially here, to see that the Pharisees here, they know the Mosaic law, and they know who's breaking it. And Jesus is telling them, yes, but the law has a place, and something greater than the law is here. And he says that by saying something greater than the temple is here. which is an even bigger deal. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless. That's a quote from the prophets. When the temple had been all out of whack and the priests were all corrupt, and God says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And so what they're doing the same thing that the priests were doing even before the Babylonian captivity, and even after they return. You see at Malachi, they're still doing this, which is why God destroys the temple twice, okay, is that they don't realize why the law is here in the first place, why the temple is here, and at the end of the day, there's a certain way that God goes about his relationship with his people, and it's through mercy.
Shouldn't the Pharisees have shuddered in their boots when they heard him say, I desire mercy?
Oh, yeah.
Because he said, I'm God.
It's right. I desire. That's right. That's exactly. He's making a direct quote in the first person from himself. That's right. Yeah, this gets them real upset. And they're not going to let go of this. And so, yeah, he's putting the words of God into his own mouth. And then he says a string of statements from 6 to 8. These are the ones that really, really are kind of shots at the Pharisees. Something greater than the temple is here, and he's talking about himself. Puts the words of God into his own mouth. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And then you would not have condemned the guiltless. So you're condemning people by the law that are actually not guilty. And then for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And those are all statements that they would take as blasphemous. He went on from there and entered their synagogue. So again, this is a bad heading. Or it could be there, but when you're reading it, you shouldn't keep this heading between 8 and 9. They're still in the same place, same things happening, same situation, same people. They're still really upset with them. He enters their synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they asked him. Now, who's they? The Pharisees are still all right there. Hey, look, there's a synagogue. Let's go into the synagogue. We're still talking. The Pharisees asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So that they might accuse him. Okay, so they've already got his disciples. But maybe they don't have him yet. Maybe he's not gleaning or something, right? And they really want to have something on him. This is entrapment. So he said to them, which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Okay, is that in accordance with the Mosaic law? No. The guy picking up sticks and numbers, I'm doing it for good, please, don't stone me. Right?
You could take line 9, line 10, down to ask him out, and take is it lawful right up to the end of 8, and that's a continuation of that same conversation. He threw the law at them, and so they're throwing a lawful question back at him. Is it lawful to heal?
Yeah, right. So, yeah. And I think that's really good because this is why I think, obviously, I like to read, and I think reading is good, but having seen this kind of dialogue play out, so let's do this. You be Jesus, all right? God help us all. All right, okay. All right. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?
Which one of you has a sheep? If it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out. How much more value is a man than a sheep? Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath?
Okay. All right. So, it's a back and forth, immediate. That's a really good point. They are, and then he said to him, stretch out your hand. So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Stretch out your hand. Right? Well, I'm going to show you.
St. Paul does this in Galatians when he says the fruit of the Spirit, and it's against these there is no law.
Yeah. Against these there is no law. So yeah, Galatians is really, it's really the key to this whole section. Really a lot of Matthew. This is why Galatians is such a good book. That there's the law, it's got its own place and time. And people are abusing it. They're using it for worldly means. They're not even using it for the purpose that God gave it to them. Okay? And Jesus comes and says, it's kind of like a comparison might be, remember the stick that Moses puts with a serpent on it? And in 2 Kings, they're worshiping it. And it's like, God told Moses to do it. He does it. And then a few hundred years later, it's become some idol. They think it's some magic act. And it's like, God gave you the law. He told you to do it. And then, over 1,000 years later, you don't even know what you're doing with it. And we still do it.
Okay, this is for the doctors. Is the stick with the snake?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's also a Greek myth, too, that both of those are both medical, right? Yeah. So yeah, we take stuff that God gives us and we mess it up, and we don't realize when the real thing is here. It'd be like here. We're in Advent now. December 24th comes around, and we change the colors. The altar, it's all white, and someone walks in and says, "What are you doing? It's supposed to be blue." That's what that's like. And you're sitting there. I think this analogy works pretty well. You can go pretty deep with this. And you're sitting there going, "No, now's the time where we celebrate Christmas." Well, what, you don't like blue? No, I like blue just fine, but blue is for Advent. And now it's Christmas time. So you don't like blue. So now we're gonna have a voters' assembly and talk about why we're gonna put you on trial, put the whole altar guild on trial because they're against blue. You didn't know what you're getting yourself into today, right? Okay. So that's what this is like. Jesus saying, no, the law is good. God put it here for a reason. It's not going to change. It's not going to change. But right now is a time where the law has gotten us where we need to be, and now something greater than the law is here. Something greater than the temple, greater than the law. Doesn't mean the law is bad. I mean, you're misusing it. So, you've turned Advent into something else or something, right? But the law is good, but now is a time for something else. That's right. Christmas time is here.
When the law was given, they were all scattered in the wilderness, and now they are all spread all over. So it's not just it's an environmental thing. It can't be done the way it was when it was given to Moses.
Well, I guess it is a different circumstance.
And the priests distorted it, like you said, they started making money. So it was done the way it was supposed to in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Then it got distorted, and so things.
And the temple is kind of an odd step. Remember, God tells them to build the tabernacle, but then they want a temple.
Yes.
Right? And then God destroys the temple because they're messing it all up. And then they rebuild the temple, and then they mess it up again, and he destroys that too through the Romans. Right? So the temple is never the end game. God didn't ask for a temple. In fact, he pushes back when David brings it up. Okay? So this is, again, it was here for a purpose. So by coming in, again, I like this analogy. Okay. Yeah. So by coming in and changing everything to white, are you breaking the laws of Advent? Well, no, something greater than Advent is here. Yeah, in their minds, because they've never seen Christmas before. They've never seen this before. They don't know this is a thing. We know it's a thing. They don't know it's a thing. right? When you've done it once, now it's okay. It's not such a huge, right? Okay. All right. So they're having this conversation. He says, stretch out your hand. And the man stretched it out, and it was restored healthy like the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him how to destroy him. This is the Greek word here. This is one way to talk about how to kill him. It's not like how to ruin his reputation. It's how to kill him. So this is it. This is where you see it. You see it in the same place. In the four Gospels, they decide to kill him at different points. In the Gospel of John, it's very early on. Although he does make the comment about the temple. Okay, about the whole, but he says, I'll destroy the temple and raise it up again. And that's really early in the Gospel of John, first couple chapters, and they say, we got to kill this guy. Luke, he's talking about how he's going to be killed, but they don't know that they want to kill him in the Gospel of Luke until he enters Jerusalem. So in the Gospel of Luke, he's talking about how he's going to be killed, and they haven't decided to kill him yet until he enters Jerusalem. In Matthew and Mark, it's this event with the Sabbath, the gleaning, and the healing of the man with the withered hand, both in Matthew and Mark. That's where they decide to kill him. Yeah.
Strike out a lot of that text too, and go from stretch out your hand to the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, and Jesus was aware of that and withdrew from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So again, yeah, right. If this was like a movie or something, so it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Stretch out your hand. He heals it, and they just leave. Right? And now he knows what they're up to, and he gets out of there too. Yeah, they probably were. They probably could have arrested him there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, while they're talking, he gets out. Yeah, all right, yeah, okay. So Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there, and many followed him, and he healed them all on the Sabbath, right? And ordered them not to make him known. Frankly, in the Gospel of John, it's very clear that after John raises Lazarus from the dead, they want to kill Lazarus too. So what's going to happen here in the Gospel of Matthew if they say, oh, Jesus healed me? That could put them in danger. So just, and there's a lot of reasons why Jesus kind of keeps his identity hidden in some ways. Okay, this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. This is the same language of his baptism. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud. Nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory. And in his name the Gentiles will hope. It's very similar to what he reads when he enters Nazareth and reads from the Isaiah scroll. This is a part of kind of this later part of Isaiah, where it's about how God is going to save his people and triumph, and there's going to be light to the Gentiles. And he really uses this Isaiah language to, Isaiah, you see it all over, from the Emmanuel prophecy to Isaiah 40. He's just fulfilling Isaiah, not with some small focus on individual passages. I hate when we do this, when we say, we're all, you get books, all the places where Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament. And they find little passages here and here and here and here. And it's like, that's fine. But I think it's better to look big picture. What is Isaiah talking about? How does Jesus fulfill the entire prophecy of Isaiah? And that's what Matthew's doing.
Now, his disciples didn't go out to the Gentiles, though, right? Wasn't it Paul? Did they
What?
to the Gentiles?
They did. His disciples do go out to the Gentiles. You can see them going all over what they knew of the world, right? At one point in Acts, Peter is supposed to be the apostle to the Gentiles with Cornelius, that whole thing. And then Paul kind of takes that upon himself Some of there's a group that kind of stay in Jerusalem, is the Jerusalem apostles, and then others go out. So Paul he clearly covers the most ground, I think. That's recorded. Others, like going all the way up to India, it's not as well recorded as Paul's stuff. Then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and mute was brought to him. And he healed him so that the man spoke and saw. And all the people were amazed and said, "Can this be the son of David? Is this the guy that God made the promise about?" But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, "It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons." And this is not the first time they said this about him. So this is what they're saying. So he's doing all this great stuff. The only way that they can reckon it is to say he's doing what's evil. And it's like, all right, well, how can they make an argument like that? Well, Beelzebul, or Satan, is commanding his demonic forces, and for whatever reason, he's telling him to leave these certain people and go somewhere else. Like, that's the picture they're painting. Knowing their thoughts, he said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand?" Right? So, this is really weakening Satan's kingdom, not strengthening it. But notice he uses that terminology. How then will his kingdom stand? So we've talked to this point. What kingdoms have we talked about at this point? Well, King Herod. Satan offers the kingdoms of the world. We've kind of got this kingdom of Judea with Herod. The kingdom of heaven with Jesus. And now here the kingdom of Satan. So you really have kind of and Satan's the one that, again, is offering the kingdoms of the world to Jesus. So you got this like worldly kingdoms overrun by satanic forces, and the kingdom of heaven coming in and just obliterating it. Casting out the satanic forces, ridding the worlds. So there are less demons now than there were during the time of Jesus, because Jesus is casting them out. What? Yeah, wouldn't that? Yeah, right. Well, yeah, what's the thing? Yeah, he's healing the sick, he's casting out demons, and he doesn't cover everything. But when he comes back, he will. What? That's the end story. "And if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges." Remember, whose towns has he gone into? The disciples' towns. Who's bringing this charge against him? Pharisees, and the Pharisees are scattered around, right? Sadducees are in Jerusalem, Pharisees are scattered around. But you might have a Pharisee that's in a town that's related to one of his disciples. So by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. Oof. But if it is by the Spirit of God that I cast out demons, and the kingdom of God has come upon you. Or how can someone enter a strong man's house and plunder his goods unless he first binds the strong man? Then indeed he may plunder his house. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Therefore I tell you, every sin and blasphemy will be forgiven people, but the blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. And whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in this age or in the age to come. So, if you can't tell the difference between the Spirit of God and the spirit of Satan, then you got problems. You've got some major issues here. And you can't come back from that. I mean, you can have your mind changed by God, But that's if that's the way you see things, then that's it. There's no you can't do that and be saved. Again, the Spirit can come and change your mind. So Jesus is very clear about what he's doing. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, that might be. See, I think I don't know to what degree the Spirit works, right? Because we do reject him. We do reject him by being sinners and disbelieving him. I think like Saul. Like he changed Saul's mind, right? Even as he was actively rejecting him. So the Spirit's going to do what he wants to do, but it's like, really, it's like, if you see this stuff and you think it's from Satan, then maybe your mind won't be changed.
You're condemning yourself by rejecting the Spirit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So he's coming into their towns. And he's like, look what your kids are doing. They're doing incredible things. Listen to them. See what they're doing. And see what I'm doing. And recognize that Satan has been reigning over this world for a long time. And now I've come to free you and to save you from all of this. And I am binding this strong satanic force. And that's what he does. That's what he does. And notice also, he speaks either in this age or in the age to come. For Jesus, there are two ages. This age and the age to come. Okay? That's it. There's not any kind of intermediate stuff like some of our modern American theologians want to tell us, This age or the age to come. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. You saw this in the Sermon on the Mount. You saw this in the words of John the Baptist. Remember, John says, a tree that doesn't bear fruit, what's going to happen? It's cut down. Then now Jesus, again, he's channeling John here. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Okay. I think this is important for all of us, especially nowadays. When think about it, think about this is one of those places where we've got some kind of cognitive dissonance as the American church. Think about it. Think about the First Amendment of the Constitution. What does it guarantee you? Yeah, that's right, in assembly. So, what are things that you can say? What are things that we value? We value the First Amendment, right? So the First Amendment, it's supposed to guarantee the fact that you can confess the true faith, right? You can get it. You can say God is true God and true man in a way that you can't do in some other countries. Right? You can publicly gather and say these things together in ways that you can't say in certain countries. In Syria, they just can't, right? Yeah. Okay.
You could say it inside the Catholic Church, but you couldn't say it on the steps.
Okay. So here in this country, you can say it out. You can say it anywhere. You can say it on a street corner with a sign, Jesus is God. Right? What else can you say because of the First Amendment? Right? That's right. You can speak incredible heresies that are guaranteed and guarded by the First Amendment. So as Americans, just generally speaking, we're kind of known for this around the world. We're not real good at watching our mouths. And I was actually told this recently when I was in San Diego. I was asking about something, and I wanted to know something, and I was told, well, you can actually be more assertive about this. And I said, really? And they said, yes, you're an American. We expect it. Verbatim quote. So I think this is something, we've got this cognitive dissonance. We feel we can say whatever we want. It's legal to say whatever you want. I mean, I suppose there are some boundaries in some places, right? But Jesus is saying, you better be careful with what you say. Be careful. You will give account for every careless word they speak, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. I think that's really, so you got his opponents, the Pharisees, they're out there, they're trying to do whatever they can to throw Jesus under the bus. They're trying to do whatever they can to arrest him, to actually have him killed at this point for their blasphemy laws, which they have. And they don't know that he's casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, but it's convenient. So they're using it, and he's saying, I know it's convenient for you, but you better be careful. You better watch it. Okay? This is serious. Now, we're not going to finish the chapter today, which is okay. Gospel chapters are long. We'll before we get to the sign of Jonah, we'll save that for next time. And again, we'll meet in a few weeks. But does anyone have any last thoughts or comments about?
I like tying that to the Pharisees, because you can take that out of context very easily, and you can have people. He was specifically talking to the Pharisees with the brood of vipers that watch out. You're saying about me being part of Beelzebub.
Mm-hmm.
That is crossing the line.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's towards him, but he also goes a little bit further out there, because he does this switch between third person and second person. So verse 37 is, by your words you will be justified, by your words you will be condemned. Verse 36, though, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. So I think it's very contextual, but there's also kind of this, I think it is a kind of a warning to all of us. Yeah. Yeah, right. No, I don't think he's saying that at all. But I do think he's saying, hey, words matter, and you be careful. You need to be careful. That's we're not the brood of vipers at this point, but I think we need to be careful. Yeah. Last two comments.
I think it's hilarious that through more freedoms, we become more like Pharisees.
We can, yeah.
They're good at twisting things around. They were taking the laws, twisting them around to their own benefit, making them look, this is the good, this is what we need to do. Where in our society, we are very good at twisting things around to make them look good, and people buy it right and left.
Right. Yeah, and so our job then as Christians in this context is to do good with what we have.
Yeah, but our freedoms have allowed this Satan to just take a hold of
Yeah. Oh yeah.
everything that comes out of our mouth.
Yeah. See, we think we can be free of Satan. Like he's going to work in a highly legalistic culture, and he's going to work in a highly free culture. He's going to do both. Right. Last comment.
I was struck when he tells the withered-hand man, don't let anyone know. The others that he healed said, don't let anyone know. Yeah, he's made it very clear to the Pharisees, you better know, I'm God.
Yeah.
But I'm not ready to declare victory yet, so everybody else can't take that position yet because I haven't declared that. I'm declaring to you, to save yourselves, you better know I'm God.
Yeah. I think there's probably several reasons for that. So he's making his identity known to them, but they're not going to get it. So anyone they're not really going to get it. Even Peter doesn't get it. Okay. And then on the same hand, on the other side of it, I think he's also protecting the people that he's healing. Okay. So when he sends someone to the temple and says, "Go get the,"
Put yourself in the position of
Right.
blasphemy by declaring me God.
Right, because you're not going to understand it either at this point.
But I expect a lot of Pharisees remember that after the resurrection.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, and you see that interplay, I think, in John also. John focuses in on just a few miracles, and he makes a big deal about them. And the Pharisees are hyper-focused on those few things, and they make a big deal about them. Even the point they want to kill Lazarus. And so, yeah, I mean, he's presenting the kingdom of heaven is here to the towns, to anyone who's going to even give it an ear. So, all right, again, we'll pick up with the second half of chapter 12 next time. And let's bow our heads and pray. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for sending your Son Jesus into this world, for declaring victory, and that he has won the victory, that your reign is here in our midst, and you reign in and through us, and that as Jesus sits at your right hand, we look forward to when he comes again, to finish the job of making all things new, that there is no evil left in this world anymore. He will completely do away with it all, Lord, and we get to live with you forever in the age to come. Father, we ask that you would help us to live in a way that acknowledges that reality even today, that we would live in the love and joy and peace of your kingdom here and now, even in the midst of the evil that still is in our hearts and that still surrounds us. Let us live knowing and trusting that you reign. In the name of Jesus, amen.